This video is brought to you by friend of the channel, SteelSeries, makers of the best keyboards, mice, and headsets on the market. They just released an all-new, all-white model of their industry-leading, award-winning premium headset, the Arctis Nova Pro Wireless. Get 12% off this or anything else on the SteelSeries website when you use offer code SKILLUP at checkout. Click below to grab one now, or stick around to the end of the video to learn more. Gamers, you all been playing Concord this past weekend? No? Yeah, I didn't think so. I feel like I'm struggling to find someone outside of the gaming press who took the time to install and play this video game, which is rough given that Sony were giving away beta codes to anyone with a PS Plus subscription and giving you 5 beta codes if you were brave enough to pre-order it. If you missed it, I did a full preview on the beta, link below the like button. TLDR, it is good, but it's got some pretty big problems like balance and unfinished game systems, and 5 weeks doesn't seem like nearly enough time to get all of that nailed down. And then there's the issue of that price point, $40 up front, plus a battle pass, plus more money for cosmetics and all that other stuff. I don't know, man, that business model just seems like a death knell for this type of game in 2024 when so many other options exist and many of them are really great games. I do wish Firewalk all the best with this one, but my advice is that a delay would be prudent, though I think that is highly unlikely given how close we are to launch. Anyway, that's the TLDR, but like I said, you can watch the full video for the complete rundown, or you can check the most recent FPS podcast, since we all checked that out and we had plenty to say on the matter. I'll leave a link to that below the like button as well. Speaking of live services on live support, did you guys hear they're giving away Suicide Squad for free? It's true, well at least it was true. The deal has expired now, but for 2 full days, Amazon were giving away the Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League to anyone with an Amazon Prime account. So I mean, technically that's not quite free, but it feels like it's basically free, right? If you're wondering, is this normal? The answer to that is a resounding no. Suicide Squad launched 5 months ago, and it was a full-priced $70 release, not including the deluxe edition bullshit, which cost even more. Now, a few short months later, you can get this for basically nothing. I'm sure I don't need to explain why and how we ended up here, as we've been chronicling the sorry saga of this game since its initial purple pustule-infested reveal. Suicide Squad was meant to be the next big thing from Rocksteady, their follow-up to the Arkham trilogy, and a billion-dollar franchise in the eyes of the clueless Warner Brothers executives. Instead, it joins the ranks of Anthem as one of the great cautionary tales of our time, and I'm sure we'll never see its like again. And by that I mean we will absolutely see its like again, since executives all have goldfish brains. If you're wondering what's actually happening with Suicide Squad right now, there's not been any official confirmation that the game will cease to get updates in the future, but it's all but confirmed by various sources and reports, including one from Jason Schreier of Bloomberg, who said that Rocksteady staff are now working on a Hogwarts Legacy director's cut, while other members of the team are preparing their pitch for what is hopefully going to be another single-player game in the future. In the meantime, there is the promised and pre-sold seasonal content on the way, some of which was meant to drop last week until it just didn't. For real, Season 2 was meant to launch on July 11th, but 2 days prior to release, Rocksteady announced that it would be delayed until July 25th. No reason was given, so that's interesting. That lack of communication is hardly surprising though, as some weeks back, Rocksteady announced that it would be no longer doing weekly update comms for the game, instead communicating only if and when it was needed. Still, properly explaining why your major seasonal content update was delayed feels like one of those times when that communication is needed, and the few remaining people still playing this game didn't even get that. Word on the street is that the game will get its promised 4 seasonal content updates, which will run into early next year, at which point the game will go into maintenance mode. Do recall that Suicide Squad is an online-only game, maintained by a conglomerate that has a proven track record of deleting their stuff so they can claim the tax write-off. Warner Brothers have said that they plan to add an offline mode to the game in the future, but given how much work goes into that and how little upside there is for them to do it, I have absolutely no faith that they will deliver on that promise. Put another way, do not expect Suicide Squad service to remain online for long, so if you want to experience this game before it gets yeeted from existence, you better get in quick. It's a rather different story for another recently released live service, the First Descendant. This one certainly seems like it's been on one hell of a journey. People like me played it a while back and weren't that impressed with it, and the launch reviews were little better, with the title sitting at a weak 55 on OpenCritic and a mixed 53% on Steam. There was also plenty of controversy at the time of launch. In addition to server capacity issues, which are pretty standard for most live service launches, people were also extremely unimpressed with the in-game spending, with Nexon charging up to $55 for a single character unlock and doing all the predictable nickel and dime bullshit you expect from a free-to-play game, especially one published by Nexon. Then there was the plagiarism stuff, where it was revealed that a number of in-game icons were so hilariously copy and pasted from Destiny 2 that even Nexon themselves agreed, issuing a statement saying, quote, "We have taken the concerns raised seriously and decided to make adjustments to ensure that the imagery that may appear similar driver clearly reflects the unique identity of our game. We will continue to improve the game for fans of the looter shooter genre, end quote. Hey, at least they didn't try to deny it, gotta give them credit for that. Here's the thing though, none of these issues have stopped this game from having an absolutely gigantic launch. In just over a week, it's amassed over 10 million players, a peak concurrent player count of around 260,000 people, and right now, at the time of writing, it is the most downloaded game on Steam. This thing is picking up momentum rather than losing it, and I've definitely seen some of the critics' sentiment shift too. A number of content creators I follow started out thoroughly unimpressed with this thing, but after spending more time with it, they came to enjoy it. Paul Tassi of Forbes is one of them. He makes a lot of Destiny 2 content, and he said of it, quote, "The First Descendant made such a poor initial impression on me that I almost quit within the first few hours. It seemed bland, repetitive, and a Warframe clone to such an extent it was actually hilarious. Now I have racked up 70 hours in under 2 weeks, and yeah, needless to say, I have changed my mind," end quote. He says it's doing just enough to keep his attention at a time when there isn't too much else right now, and maybe that's one of the reasons why the First Descendant is doing as well as it is, because yeah, Dry July is a thing, and I'm not talking about the booze. Either way, it's objectively a huge success, and Nexon definitely has something on their hands here. If they can nurture it over time, then who knows? Maybe it'll join the ranks of Borderlands, Warframe, and Destiny 2 as a looter shooter mainstay, but we've got a long way to go before we get to that point, so let's not get ahead of ourselves. Hey, remember Bioshock? Sure you do. They made a few of those games before creator Ken Levine pieced out to form a new studio, which would go on to make Judas, a game I got to exclusively preview earlier in the year. Link below the like button if you happen to miss that one. Well, while Ken Levine's been doing that, a newly formed studio called Cloud Chamber has been working on a new Bioshock game. Not a remaster or a reboot or whatever, a proper new entry in the franchise, heavily rumored to be set in the Antarctic, which would make a lot of sense given this franchise's approach to setting. Cloud Chamber has been working on this thing for a long time. I'm gonna say like 3, 4, 5 years plus, without ever actually announcing or revealing anything. It does appear though that things are starting to happen. Cloud Chamber has announced that they are massively ramping up recruiting efforts, saying on their website, quote, "Cloud Chamber is currently recruiting like mad for game developers in 2 amazing locations, the San Francisco Bay Area and Montreal, Quebec. Our open positions are below," end quote. They have 29 positions open right now across a range of technical and narrative disciplines. When you start ramping up like that, it could mean a bunch of things. Maybe it means you're moving from pre-production to full production. Maybe you've been in full production for a long time now, but you need more bodies. Maybe you're nearing the finish line and you just need a few more people for that final push. We have absolutely no idea, but it is encouraging because frankly, with how little we've heard from Cloud Chamber over the past few years, more than a few people were wondering what's going on with this Bioshock game. Is it ever going to come out? Is it going to be vaporware? Signs point to it being alive and well, so hopefully it gets an official reveal sometime soon. Alright, quite a few lightning round items to get through this week, so let's jump into them. The iOS store just got its first ever PC emulator. If that sounds like old news, then you're half right. A while back, Apple changed their policy regarding emulators on the App Store, which led to an absolute flood of downloads as Apple serfs could now experience what Android gigachads have been able to experience for over a decade. Plenty of console emulators hit the iOS storefront, but this week UTM arrived, which will let you play DOS, Linux, Windows, and Mac games. Hell, it can technically run Windows 11 if you're brave enough to try that. This one is likely to have more limited appeal than console emulators, but if you've ever dreamed of playing the old Commander Keen games on your mobile, well, now you can. Crash Bandicoot 5 is in development. Wait, I'm getting an update on that story. It was in development. Damn you, Activision. Confirmation of this comes from one Nicholas Cole, a character designer and illustrator who worked on Spyro Reignited and Crash 4. He was publicly lamenting a cancelled project that was neither Spyro nor Crash, but in doing so he said, quote, "Someday folks will hear about the Crash 5 that never was and it's gonna break hearts," end quote. Yes, it certainly will. Do you remember that old Ubisoft game Driver? It was a PS1 game and it absolutely rocked because it had some of the best car handling physics we'd ever seen at the time. Great video game, but that was a very long time ago, like 20 years ago in fact. So when Ubisoft announced that they were partnering with a production house to make a live-action TV series based on Driver, I was like, what? Wouldn't the crew be the better play for that one at this point? You could make it like a soft reboot of the classic 1981 film The Cannonball Run and kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Rest in peace, John Candy, we are still not over your loss. Man, I'm getting really off track. Where were we? Oh yeah, they're making a TV show based on Driver, or at least they were, because now they're not. The production house announced that they'd ceased working on it, but they say they are working on other projects related to the franchise. No idea what they would be, or why anyone would care 20 plus years later. You know, that just seems weird. What are you gonna do, like a Driver comic book? It's very strange, but don't worry, the Watch Dogs movie just started filming, so please look forward to that one. Man, I really hope they cast Jared Leto as Aiden Pierce. That would absolutely rule, And I'm getting off topic again. Speaking of adaptations, it turns out that Palworld, a game that was more than just borrowing from Pokemon, is entering the world of licensed merch and transmedia. Palworld Entertainment is a new entity established by Palworld developer Pocket Pair, as well as Sony Music and a company called Aniplex, which are a subsidiary of Sony. Their first push is going to be some Palworld merch, which will go on sale in China later this year. There's also hints that there may be a physical trading card game, because if your character designs are all based on Pokemon, then I guess you've got to base your product portfolio on it too. Incidentally, the Palworld studio boss spoke to GameFi and confirmed that they never got any legal threats from Game Freak, but I do wonder if this new push is set to arouse renewed interest on the part of Game Freak's lawyers. Stay tuned, I guess. Recently, Disney was hacked, resulting in the loss of around 1 terabyte worth of commercial data. There were different things revealed in relation to TV, movies, and video games. On the video games front, there was a pitch deck for an Aliens Fireteam Elite 2. If you don't remember the first game, it was a pretty straightforward but surprisingly competent co-op shooter set in the Aliens universe. Didn't sell gangbusters, nor was it a critical darling, but it was a solid game that made Aliens fans like myself very happy. The pitch deck proposed a sequel, one that would include a campaign mode of around 10 to 13 missions, which could be played solo or alongside AI bots. Encouragingly, it says that there are no microtransactions planned for this game, a great thing for us, but probably a bad thing for the developers as they go through this pitching process. It's unclear if Disney greenlit this project, so right now take all of this with a grain of salt. I'll keep you posted if we hear any more. Speaking of leaks of games where you fight scores of xenomorph-like aliens, Space Marine 2. Now this one is very bad. It turns out that a near final build of the entire game has leaked online. A number of YouTube videos were uploaded as proof of the leak, many of them offering major story spoilers. So this is a warning, be extremely careful what you click on when it comes to Space Marine 2, because there is a lot of information rolling around out there right now, which is a real shame. We reached out to Focus for comment on this, and they did get back to us, directing us to a statement they put on Twitter that reads, quote, "We are deeply touched by the overwhelming support we've received from our community following the leak of an old build of our upcoming game, Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2. Our teams have poured years of hard work, passion, and dedication into creating a game worthy of your hopes and expectations, and it's disheartening that many of the surprises we worked hard to keep secret were spoiled. We're saddened that this build, which will be almost a year old by the time we launch, is how some of our most eager fans will experience Space Marine 2, end quote. They'd go on to ask that people do not play the build or share any spoilers. The game is scheduled for September 9th, which isn't too far away, thankfully. I played a preview build of it and absolutely loved it. I do sincerely hope that this leak doesn't do much to damage the work that Saber Interactive has done, or their launch plans, or how well the game sells, because if the preview was anything to go by, then this one deserves to sell a lot. Speaking of big sales, Stellar Blade developer Shift Up just completed their IPO, valuing their company at around $320 million US, the largest gaming float in 2 years, with PUBG publisher Krafton achieving a $3.8 billion valuation back in 2022. Shift Up did well out of Stellar Blade, but their real cash cow is Goddess of Victory Nike, a gacha game which raised over $70 million in its first month when it launched back in 2022. Despite this, Shift Up are clearly interested in making non-gacha games too, and with how successful Stellar Blade was, I very much expect we'll see a sequel to that in the not too distant future. So what got announced or delayed this week? Well, did you enjoy Shredder's Revenge and can't wait for that Power Rangers beat 'em up? Well, good news, there's another old school IP being converted into a pixel-based side-scroller. The Karate Kid Street Rumble is exactly what it says on the tin, a street brawler starring Karate Kid characters, and I'm not gonna lie, seeing Daniel San and Mr. Miyagi in pixel form really hits me in the feels. This just looks super good, and yet I find myself very hung up on the fact that it's being published by Game Mill, the company that put out Skull Island: Rise of Kong last year, a game that somehow managed to eclipse Golem to become the worst release of 2023. I very much hope that this does not follow in Kong's footsteps, but you gotta admit, it would be pretty funny if it did. Karate Kid Street Rumble is on its way to all platforms and it launches on September 20th. Sticking with that exact same theme for a little while longer, we're getting a full Double Dragon reboot courtesy of developer Ukes and publisher Arc Systems Works. It's called Double Dragon Revive and it's headed to all platforms sometime next year. It's not going the pixel graphics route though, it's doing the whole like 2D, 3D thing, and to be honest, I don't know about this. It kind of looks a bit generic, maybe? Like if you were to make one of those Unreal Engine tech demo trailers that are on YouTube that are like Double Dragon in Unreal Engine 5, I get that sort of vibe from this. Still, way too early to judge it. Have to see a hell of a lot more gameplay than we saw here, so hopefully we'll get a better look at it soon. Planet Coaster released back in 2016 and instantly became the modern-day custodian of the classic theme park or roller coaster tycoon tradition. All these years later, Planet Coaster is getting a sequel. It's called Planet Coaster 2, and the big addition seems to be the ability to build water parks, or at the very least water rides that you can add to traditional parks. It's heading to all platforms bar the Switch sometime northern fall this year. Right now, all we have is a cinematic reveal, but the developers say we'll get a proper look at gameplay on July 31st, so stay tuned. GreedFall 2, The Dying World. Okay, so this one is going to be a bit of a shock if you played the first game. That was a cinematic BioWare-style RPG with real-time action RPG combat. GreedFall 2 is actually closer to Dragon Age Origins in that it's a turn-based CRPG. I actually played this at Summer Games Fest, and I gotta tell you, I did not like what I played, like at all. Be it the setting, the dialogue, the visuals, but especially the combat. It just felt like a massive step down versus the first game, and I say that as someone who loves CRPG combat. This was just not a good rendition of it. The developers did tell me that they plan to launch this into early access soon-ish, but now they've confirmed it will enter early access on September 24th. PC only at first, but the game will make its way to consoles after that early access period is over. Look, I don't know how that early access is going to go. I'll put it that way, and I'll check back in on it then. Hopefully it's made significant progress since that build I played in June, because if the EA launch is anything close to that, then I think fans of the first game are going to be in for a very rude shock. Speaking of shock, did you know Nintendo are working on an actual horror game? For real. Take a look at this teaser they uploaded to their YouTube channel. So this was really exciting and actually had people speculating that this might have been something in partnership with Bloober Team, the studio behind Layers of Fear, The Medium, and the upcoming Silent Hill 2 remake. But IGN reported they had sources quashing this rumor, and to be honest, I'm not surprised, since Nintendo demand a quality bar that Bloober Team might struggle to hit. Just yesterday, Nintendo offered some confirmation on all of this. This is actually a game called The Smiling Man Famicom Detective Club, which is a new entry in a very old and very niche series from deep in the annals of Nintendo lore. The original series was only published on the NES in Japan, and they're essentially like visual novel detective games like 30 years before that genre ever actually existed. They were written by Yoshio Sakamoto, who would go on to direct the Metroid series. He returns here as a producer for this one, and yeah, it's not the gritty survival horror game that people were hoping for, but it is well and truly outside of Nintendo's traditional wheelhouse, so on that basis alone, I'm interested. Also, this drops on August 29th, which is very soon, a very unusual reveal and release timeline for a Nintendo game. Nintendo may be flexing out of their comfort zone, but Disney are staying firmly in their lane with Disney Pixel RPG, a simple mobile-based RPG for iOS and Android that lets you control various pixelated Disney characters like Mickey, Aladdin, Peter Pan, and more. Unclear how this is going to be monetized. Let's hope it's not a gacha game, because we really don't need 6-year-olds getting on that shit that early. This one arrives September 9th, and you can of course pre-register for it right now. Last announcement for the week are the dates for the Black Ops 6 beta. For the first time in a hot minute, this beta will be on all platforms simultaneously, rather than on PlayStation first, as has been the tradition for a while now. You will get early access if you pre-order, letting you in from August 30th to September 4th, while an open beta happens on September 6th to 9th, allowing everyone to try it so long as you have a PS Plus membership, a Game Pass Core membership, or just an internet connection on PC, since kindly Gaben has not deigned to charge us a fee for the privilege of playing multiplayer games on his platform. Call of Duty Black Ops 6 arrives on October 25th, day one on Game Pass, but the Ultimate Game Pass, of course, not the standard Game Pass. But it is on Game Pass for PC, otherwise you'll just have to buy it. But you can't play the multiplayer unless you have Game Pass Core, so don't forget about that. Hope that's all crystal clear. One delay announcement this week, and it's for City Skylines 2. Man, every new headline about this game is just straight up bad news, and this week is no different. City Skylines 2 launched on PC a little while ago, absolutely riddled with problems that are still not fixed to this day. The game was meant to ship for PC and console at the same time, but just a few weeks prior to launch, the publisher announced that the console version had been delayed and would arrive imminently. It then got delayed again, targeting an October 24 release. Now it's been delayed again, this time indefinitely. It does seem like the studio still intends to release the console version at some point, but were unwilling to commit to a date, so look forward to it sometime in 2025, I guess, if we're lucky. 2 cancellations this week. The first is for a game called Synced from developer Next Studios and published by Tencent. This was another multiplayer looter shooter that never got much cut through. It launched a year ago, and at one point it did hit a peak concurrent player count of around 10k players, but more recently the player count had sat somewhere in the low double digits. Tencent say the servers will be turned off on the 8th of September, just 1 year and 1 day after they went live. Very unclear what might be next for Next Studios. And finally, did you know Riot were working on a platform fighter similar to Smash? It's true, this story comes from Mikhail Klimentov and his Reader Grev newsletter. At one point, Riot had around 70 to 80 staff working on this, and they codenamed it Pool Party, which, yeah, I think that name strangely fits. It was set in the League of Legends universe using League characters, and it was a platform fighter in the same vein as Smash or Multiverses or whatever else. Apparently, Riot was spooked by the launch of Multiverses, which they saw as underperforming despite its absolutely huge launch numbers. As such, Riot cancelled the project in May of this year, reassigning half of the staff while the other half are either applying for internal positions or have since left Riot. Riot responded to Klimentov with a vanilla statement that neither confirmed nor denied the existence of this specific project, but given the depth of sourcing, this report is highly reliable and it will forever remain a shame that Riot didn't see this one through, because I could definitely see this one working. I mean, like a platform fighter with Blitzcrank, Heimerdinger, and Renekton. Yes, sign me up for that, thank you very much. So what came out last week? Well, Once Human arrived exclusive to PC for the moment. This is yet another open world survival based MMO, but with a few important twists. Number one, it's set in a creepy, supernatural, almost Control-esque type world that honestly has a pretty good vibe, and certainly one you don't see often in survival games. The other twist is that this is free to play. Again, not something that you often see with survival games, since they're usually like $40 with no in-game spending. So reviews for this one are a little tricky to unpack. If we go by Steam review score alone, it's not a good news story. It's currently sitting at a mixed 67%, with a lot of those reviews taking exception to the end-user license agreement, which people claim lets NetEase collect far too much data, including aliases, social media accounts, geolocation. Hell, in certain US states, they can get postal addresses, physical characteristics or descriptions, protected characteristics such as race or gender, browsing history, occupation, and ethnic origin as derived from profile pictures or avatars. That is a lot of information. NetEase actually released a statement saying that this collection would only happen in instances where they were compelled to do so by law enforcement, but regardless, it spooked enough people that it's manifestly hurt the game's Steam score, which is a rough spot to be in. On the critic front, there aren't too many reviews up, but the ones that aren't super positive. Gaming Bolt, for example, scored it a 6 out of 10, saying, quote, "It's not bad. There are far worse survival crafting games with less enjoyable gameplay loops and more grinding. The mashing of multiple different titles and genres, from looter shooters to horror and MMOs, is easy to get lost in, despite the wild tonal shifts," end quote. Rock Paper Shotgun, however, really had some things to say about this one. In their unscored review, they said, quote, "On the surface, what you're getting here is a 6 out of 10 third-person shooter from 10 years ago that gleefully spills thumbtacks along any simple paths to progress with live service obfuscation. Propped up by a detached crafting and building economy that has you popping mined rocks and chopped wood into the oven and then taking out freshly baked shotguns a few minutes later," end quote. It did say that there was still a certain quality that makes this alluring on some level, but yeah, it was otherwise a pretty brutal write-up. That Ace Combat 7 Switch port drops, and somehow the mad lads at Bandai Namco managed to pull it off, squeezing the ambitious Arcade Flyer into Nintendo's handheld. Initial reports are that it runs pretty well. It's 720p at 30 FPS, but it's apparently solid in terms of frame rates, and the visuals haven't been downgraded too egregiously. Hogwarts Legacy on Switch this ain't, though that is a pretty low bar to clear. Speaking of ports, Darkest Dungeon 2 arrived for PlayStation, Xbox, and the Switch. Never really any risk that this wouldn't translate well to console platforms, and sure enough, it's in good shape. Great game and a solid pickup if you haven't already checked it out. Angerfoot is that Hotline Miami but in first-person game that we've mentioned a few times in the show before. Published by Devolver Digital, it's unsurprising that it's had a pretty solid critical reception, since Devolver do know how to pick them. Already on Steam, it's sitting at 93% very positive, and critics are also impressed with it sitting at a strong 78 on OpenCritic. A bit of a spread in the scores though. For example, Game Informer scored it a 9 out of 10, saying, quote, "Thwarting foes milliseconds before they pull the trigger, either by brute force or cleverly utilizing my surroundings, never cease to feel cool. You should definitely walk a mile in these shoes," end quote. Digital Trends, on the other hand, saw it rather differently, scoring it a 2 out of 5 and saying, quote, "What's disappointing is how much it gets in the way of its own brainlessly fun concept by misunderstanding why similar genre classics like Hotline Miami work so well. Angerfoot should be a trashy game that mainstream players find off-putting, but it reaches that status in all the wrong ways," end quote. Finally, Flock arrived for all platforms bar the Switch last week. This is that very chilled out game about flying around in pretty environments and inviting nearby animal friends to just follow you around as you do so. That is the actual premise of this game, and it does seem to be enough. Only 12 Steam reviews up at the time of writing, so not much we can go on there, but critics got hold of it early and they enjoyed it. It's sitting at a fair 73 on OpenCritic. GameSpot had a really nice write-up. They scored it an 8 out of 10 and said, quote, "Flock's simple mechanics and colorful world mean it all plays like a hug. With its low barrier of entry, people of all ages and skill levels can enjoy the game, and in two-player co-op, even enjoy it together. When things do get a bit more complex, that leads to some of the game's most rewarding moments, like discovering and naming super elusive animals, or eventually filling out an all-important field guide with every critter and call seen and heard in the uplands. Flock paints the picture of a world that welcomes you with open arms and equips you with the tools to reciprocate the same admiration and respect for its dozens of interesting creatures, end quote. That's out now, and it's also available on Game Pass if you'd like to give it a try that way. So what's coming out this week? Well, kicking things off is Bo, Path of the Teal Lotus. It's a lovely looking 2D action platformer that looks quite similar to the recent Nine Souls, that this one is grounded in Japanese mythology. Really like the art style here. It's developed by Squidshot Games and published by Humble, who usually put out good stuff actually. That's a solid label. It's launching tomorrow for all platforms. Dungeons of Hinterberg is one I've had my eye on for a while now. It initially caught my eye because, I mean, look at it. How could it not? Visually, the cell shading and vibrant color palette makes it look like a wholesome Borderlands or Sable, which I really loved. Subsequent trailers would show off a surprisingly broad game encompassing combat, exploration, puzzle solving, and even rail grinds. Quite a few genres and inspiration mixed into this one, and I'm speaking to a few people who are currently reviewing it, and they all love it. So yeah, all signs green across the board for this one, and it's out tomorrow for Xbox and PC, and yes, it is on Game Pass, so there you go, easy. Another Game Pass release dropping tomorrow is Flintlock: The Siege of Dawn. As I mentioned in the past, this one comes from developer A44, a Kiwi studio who previously released Ashen, one of the games to first offer its own unique spin on the Souls-like subgenre before we even referred to it as a subgenre. Flintlock is very different to that. It's still a third-person melee action game with RPG elements, but this is not a Souls-like. This is much more like a third-person action-adventure game, which we don't get too many of these days, so it's nice that A44 went down this path. I played a preview build some months back, and I enjoyed what I played. It's got a sort of playfulness, refusing to be pigeonholed into one single gameplay style. I really liked the movement and traversal actually, which was heavily reliant on using explosives to double jump. It was fun, it was, and I do hope the whole package sticks the landing. Like I said, it's out tomorrow for PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and Game Pass. Something else I played recently is Nintendo World Championships NES Edition. Now this is a bit of a strange one, in large part because I could have sworn that this one was being given away as part of Nintendo's online membership thing, because typically whenever you see a classic NES game, it's on the online membership thing. But no, this is a new boxed product from Nintendo that is not being handed out via a subscription service. It's quite a novel concept. Imagine very specific sections of different levels from different NES classics, and they're all ranked by how difficult they are, and you boot them up to see how quickly you can complete them. And that's it, that's the game. It's hundreds of challenges from across dozens of NES classics. There's ghost mode challenges and leaderboards and local PvP. I went into this thinking, this seems kind of dumb, but I came out really enjoying it after the 2 hours I spent with it. It's almost like party game fodder, or would be great for kids who are just starting out with games and you want to steer them away from mobile store garbage. It's alright. I don't know if the price tag is quite right, it does feel a little high, but if this looks like it might interest you, then maybe take a punt on it, because I certainly found myself pleasantly surprised. This one launches exclusive to the Switch tomorrow. Master Detective Archives Rain Code Plus is the next game from the guy that made that crazy popular Danganronpa series. This one was released back in 2023 as a Switch exclusive, but tomorrow it'll be available on all platforms. This package contains all the subsequently added DLC sub-stories as well. Americans, you guys are going through it right now, so here's some good news. There's a new college football game coming out this week. To be honest, I don't quite understand why this is such a big deal, since I don't understand your weird sport, but I do know that Americans that I speak to are extremely excited about this. It's the first college football game in 11 years, so that's kind of cool, I guess. Will any of the players see a dime out of this, or will it all go to the schools and EA? My guess is the latter, but please do correct me in the comment section if I'm mistaken. Air Sports College Football 2025 launches on the 19th for PS5 and Xbox. Ripperino PC Bros. Here's one that I'm actually really looking forward to. Kunitsugami Path of the Goddess is a very out of left field play from Capcom. This is a lot of indie game energy, which would make sense since it's rumored that Capcom's team who made games for Apple Arcade made this. It's not an action game in a strict sense, it's actually a very beautiful, very thoughtfully composed tower defense game, pulling in Japanese military traditions and art and spirituality to create something that feels very lovingly crafted. I know because I played it at Summer Games Fest. It was one of the biggest pleasant surprises that I got whilst there, since I honestly went into this thinking it was like a character action game, so, you know, some hands-on time really sorted me out quick. Reviews for this one just went live prior to recording, and TLDR, they are great. We'll go through them in more detail next week, but thumbs up across the board. This one's hitting on the 19th for all platforms bar Switch, and it is day one on Game Pass. Another one I've been looking forward onto for a while now is Conscript. This is a PS1 style survival horror game set in the trenches of World War I. We've had a few games explore this setting recently, actually, but none in this style or perspective. This is actually the work of a solo Australian developer. Shout out to my brother from down under. The Steam demo for this one a while back was fantastic, so really looking forward to this. It drops on the 23rd for all platforms. Want to become an F1 manager so you can subtly undermine Verstappen at every turn? Well, now you can thanks to F1 Manager 2024, which arrives on the 23rd for all platforms bar Switch. And finally, one for the X-Files fans amongst you, The Operator arrives July 23rd for PC. It's from Bureau 81, and how convenient a game like this should come from the Bureau. It's an interface-led game where you play as what is basically an FBI investigator trying to solve cases. You gotta review case files and mugshots and footage and all that good stuff. Hopefully there's some big government conspiracy that lets you uncover alien life or something or other. I don't know. That is wishful thinking on my part. Probably not going to happen, but the game still looks cool. Hey, put this on your radar. We first met Schim a little while ago during a Steam Next Fest, and it left a nice impression. It's a pretty simple premise. You're a little shadowy dude, and you just have to get from point A to point B by leaping from shadow to shadow. That's pretty simple at first when the shadows are all static, but later on things get a lot more tricksy when you're forced to jump between moving shadows that can disappear pretty soon after that. It's got a sepia-inspired color palette, and the line work is doing a lot of the heavy lifting here. Interestingly, there's also some narrative, with certain levels having their own quaint little slice of life story to tell. Best of all, not much of a wait for this one, as it's actually out today for all platforms. If you want to grab it on PC, I've left a link to it over on my Steam Curator page, which also has links to all of the other put this on your radar stuff I've recently covered. I'll leave a link to all of that below the like button. Sort of free stuff time now, and I hope you all got hold of Suicide Squad, Chivalry 2, and Rise of the Tomb Raider during Prime Day, because that was one hell of a giveaway. If you missed that, then there are some consolation prizes though, as Amazon is still giving away a boatload of stuff like Knights of the Old Republic 2, Shredder's Revenge, Card Shark, Call of Juarez, and tons more, so be sure to log in and check all that out. Epic is still doing their giveaway thing. Right now you can grab Floppy Nights, but tomorrow that'll be replaced by two new offerings. The first is Maid of Sker, a Welsh-themed stealth horror game set in 1889. Sits at around 80% mostly positive on Steam, so it seems like a good pickup. The other one is Arcade Paradise, a really great first-person management game where you have to manage a laundry while also simultaneously converting it into a video games arcade. No idea how people come up with this sort of shit, but it's cool and I respect it. Game Pass is having a pretty damn good month. As we mentioned earlier in the episode, 4 day one new releases dropping on there today and tomorrow, including Flock, Flintlock, The Siege of Dawn, Dungeons of Hinterberg, and Kunitsugami, Path of the Goddess. Really strong lineup that'll see you through for the next few weeks at least. And finally, the PS Plus Extra and Premium tiers got their monthly refreshes. Big shout outs to the excellent Remnant 2, Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion, and Mountain Blade 2 Bannerlord. If you're in for something a little crazier, then both No More Heroes 3 and Travis Strikes Again No More Heroes Complete Edition are also on there. Always nice to see Suda stuff doing the rounds. Alright, Shadow of the Erdtree has been out for over a month now, meaning that the statute of limitations on spoilers has well and truly passed. If, however, by some chance you have not seen the last boss and you would like to keep it a surprise, then worry not, because you're not going to see it here either. What you will see is a very weird mod from someone called MRR Chrysich King. They thought that they might change up who you meet during the climactic conclusion to Elden Ring's first and only expansion. Here's the first change they made. See if you can spot it. Patches is of course one of the few characters who transcends the Souls-like timeline, God bless him, but there is one character who is even more important to Souls-likes, though he has never actually appeared in any of the games. Luckily, this mod fixed that and gives this legendary warrior the screen time he deserves.
Tarnished one, aspiring lord of the old order. If you have known sin, if you grieve for this world, then yield the path forward to us. To I, Nicola.
Alright, ladies and gents, that's the show for the week. Hope you had a great time, and if you did, be sure to hit that like button, as it always helps the channel out in a big way. Do subscribe if you'd like to come back and do it all again next week, and remember to hit that notification bell so you know the minute this video goes live. Personally, I'm looking forward to that Marvel Rivals beta, which kicks off next week. Be sure to sign up for that one if you haven't already done so, and do check out our Patreon this week. While I was at Summer Games Fest, I got the chance to see Monster Hunter Wilds behind closed doors and interview the senior development team, including the game director Yuya Tokuda. A really fascinating chat about what they're aiming to deliver with this next installment, and the best parts of that interview are now up over on the Patreon, freely available to all, so I'll leave a link to that below the like button. Alright everyone, thanks for stopping by, and a big thanks to this week's sponsor, SteelSeries. It is no secret that this video sponsor, SteelSeries, puts out the best gaming headset on the market, the Arctis Nova Pro Wireless. That's not just me talking, by the way. Go and look at reviews, go and look at the dozens and dozens of awards that this thing has racked up, and you will see just how good this thing is. I've been using it since before it was released, actually. SteelSeries sent me an early unit, and it's been incredible. Could never imagine replacing it unless SteelSeries were to release an all-new, all-white edition that contrasts beautifully with my all-black setup for a nice domino-style effect, while neatly matching my white controllers when playing on Xbox or PS5. That's right, the crazy scientists at SteelSeries Labs have done it. They took the best headset on the market and gave it a brilliant all-white finish that looks lovely whether you're using it at home or on the go. Because believe me, this thing is versatile. The white Arctis Nova Pro Series headsets come in PlayStation or Xbox variants, but they also support multi-system connect, allowing you to connect to a PC or multiple consoles at the same time, so you can just switch between them really easily. That's done through this sexy looking dedicated audio controller, which not only handles that, but also lets you control volume, chat mix levels, switch audio modes, tweak EQ, and much more. This thing comes with 2 batteries in the box, one of them charging in that DAC while you use the other one, giving you unlimited battery, especially given that each of these batteries supports up to 22 hours of playback. It's also one of the only gaming headsets on the market to feature active noise cancelling, something that almost no other gaming headset on the market does, and I absolutely love that. Putting them on and hearing that sound of silence is just so good every time. There are other bells and whistles on the SteelSeries Arctis Nova Pro Wireless headset, so if you want to get the full rundown, you can find out more info on their website. The white edition is brand spanking new, and it will sell out because that's what always happens whenever SteelSeries release a new headset. So if you want to grab it, be sure to get in quick. Best of all, you get 12% off when you use offer code SKILLUP at checkout over at steelseries.com. That's 12% off, no strings attached when you visit steelseries.com and use offer code SKILLUP. Thanks SteelSeries for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.